Hi, I hope you're having a great day. I'd like to show you how I made this Bridgerton-inspired tumbler with rose topper. Lots of tips and tricks ahead to help you create your own designs. Let's get started. This is lavender glitter over a pink painted base. I covered that with 60 mils of epoxy, and once that cured, decided where I wanted my peekaboo decals. Spray painted it a beautiful shade of not French blue. But we're going to trust the process and peel off those decals. That is way too pink. I'm going to clean up the edges of this peekaboo with a little bit of nail polish remover on a cotton bud. Just lightly going over the inner edges. It's going to be covered with a decal, so I'm not making myself crazy going for perfect, just getting the worst of it. And then I'm going to work on this color. This slate gray looks much more blue here, but honestly, it's a really good color to paint my concrete patio. This needs to be Bridgerton blue, so I'm adding just enough bright blue mica powder to make this 15 mils of epoxy opaque. I went with the bright blue because it simultaneously brought up the slate gray and toned down the hot pink that was supposed to be lavender. Sometimes colors just don't work like you want them to, and we need to tweak them. I did a little test swatch to make sure it didn't completely cover up the lavender, and it worked. Yay! I also added in a little white glitter that turned out to be totally unnecessary because I ended up doing another layer of glitter after this. This fixed the color issue, but it left streaks and came out a little too dark. It happens. It just gives us an opportunity to experiment to find a fix. I added a heck of a lot of white glitter to 20 mils of epoxy. This glitter reflects blue, so I get a sparkle that goes with the blue color, as well as a sort of Instagram filter effect. So I just loaded the tumbler up with that, made sure to get it all over and as smoothed out as possible, then used a stir stick to pull out any stray glitter that had made its way into my trusty old white. And in just a second, you're going to see a fully decaled cut. Because it took days, I didn't want to bore you with watching me cut out and apply stuff. To make sure any little sticky uppy bits were totally flat, I took super glue and a piece of paper, put the glue on the paper, and slid it under the sticky uppy bit. Nothing oozed out, so I just used my fingernail to hold it down. And then I just did a quick search for more sticky uppies. This video is really about troubleshooting and finding inspiration. I found just about all of these decals on Cricut Access, but you can absolutely make this your own. I love this gluing technique, by the way. It's just clean and neat. We'll come back to this little air-dry clay rose in a bit. I put epoxy just over the top. I put a layer of epoxy over the decals and then used metallic acrylic paint and a teeny tiny brush to outline all of the roses. Rose gold over the pink and light gold on the gold. It's a very tedious process, but I think these hand-painted details can really elevate a project. I did this after the epoxy so that I could easily wipe off any mistakes that I made. And I made a few. Acrylic is water-based, so most uh-ohs came off with a damp paper towel. Nail polish remover worked on more stubborn smudges. I also added in some leaves and a few other details here and there. The rose was painted in layers of pinks and golds, and I cut a little notch to give the straw some extra room, then embedded these magnets using an X-Acto knife. I just made small holes and pushed the magnets into them. Next, I used some UV epoxy on the back to seal up the clay and secure the magnets. Gloves and proper PPE like respirators are so important when you're working with the chemicals we're working with. Just because you can buy them at the craft store doesn't make them safe. Here I used a disposable brush to apply the epoxy, making sure to go around the magnets but not over them. Once this cured, I went back around the magnets with some super glue just to make sure they weren't going to go anywhere. You always want to make sure you're securing magnets by putting your adhesives under and around. Putting anything over the magnets can reduce their ability to stick, and that's no good. You don't want your topper to go flying across the car because you slammed on brakes. Not that I would know anything about that. And I made sure everything was smoothed out and put it under my UV lamp to cure. Direct sunlight can also work. Found that out making this rose. Then I got to seal in the paint. I added a drop of pink resin dye to some epoxy that already had white glitter mixed in. It didn't do much, but I'll take any opportunity to add depth of color. While we watch me color and apply epoxy, let me tell you about how this rose happened. Back around Valentine's, I found an actually Bridgerton branded silicone ice mold for $3. My husband had some air dry clay left over from some film props he'd been working on, so we experimented to see if it would work in a mold. Oh, that's just me showing that the UV resin cured. And lo and bedaggum-told, it did work. Once it dried, I added the epoxy, and it's just been sitting and waiting for this for a couple of months. This entire project happened because I found a cheap ice mold while looking for school valentines for my kid. And there we go. Sparkle, sparkle. This next little bit is showing you how to clean up the rim of the cup. I like to finish each cup with a bright silver rim and just a little epoxy overhang to make sure all my paint and glitter is sealed in. It's just easier to clean it all off before applying the last layers. I used an X-Acto knife to shave off any epoxy buildup on the rim and inner lip. Please always be careful when using such a sharp blade, because this is terrifying sped up. Good Lord. Oh boy. I sanded the rim to rough it up slightly so the epoxy has more to grab onto. Then I grabbed my handy-dandy nail polish remover to clean off the remaining paint. I guess it's pretty self-explanatory. While the epoxy layer on the tumbler cured, I decided to bedazzle the rose. I've got a champagne gold, Aurora Borealis, and some pinks. I wanted the crystals to mostly blend in with the rose colors, so gold on gold, pink on pink, that sort of thing. The pink and Aurora Borealis are hot fix, but I just super glued them all on. I set them out on this no-slip mat, and I highly recommend one for crystal work. It really keeps them from going everywhere. This is a wax pencil, which again is great. I used to use tweezers to pick up crystals, but they ended up flying all over the place. The tweezers got super glue all over them. I had to switch between pairs while the glue dried. It was a freaking mess. I'm not coordinated enough for that. The crystals stick to the wax pencil, then come right off onto the glue. Way easier. Anyway, I started putting crystals anywhere that had an imperfection, then filled in the rest. Love the sparkle. This is the lid. I picked up these magnets with the rose, set them on the cup, marked the back with a wax pencil, then super glued them in place. Then I went around them with the UV resin to fully secure them. Again, using a glove to protect myself, I squeezed the resin straight from the tube around the magnets, then set the lid under my UV light to cure. While literally everything was curing, I thought it might be time for an iced blackberry Americano, because what else was I doing? I started with ice, added in a ½ ounce of blackberry syrup, topped with 2 shots of espresso. That's so pretty. Filled it the rest of the way up with cold filtered water, then drizzled in a generous amount of sweetened condensed milk. This isn't sponsored or anything, by the way. I just really like coffee and thought a light, easy, slightly tart ice drink went perfectly with the season. And it's all done. Let me know in the comments if you were able to use any of the tips. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you next time.